You sowed your seeds, and a week or two later, you have germination. Congratulations! It's a super exciting time. But don't get too excited just yet, because there's still plenty of work to do before you can get them out into the garden. In fact, the time just after germination is one of the most critical periods in the life cycle of a plant. And there are plenty of common mistakes that any gardener can make that can derail things and can stunt growth, weaken stems, or even kill the plants. Today, we're going to talk about the most common mistakes that a gardener can make post-germination and what you can do to ensure that your seedlings stay strong. While most of the seeds that you choose to start indoors for your garden actually need to be buried in order to sprout, after germination, all of your plants need direct exposure to light. And getting too little or not strong enough light is one of the main reasons why a seedling could turn into a tall, spindly, floppy mess. When this happens, it's because the plants are stretching to reach the light. We call this legginess. Even a bright south-facing window often is not going to provide enough direct light to keep seedlings compact and growing strong. The leaves need light in order to photosynthesize. And if they're not getting enough light, then the stems are going to overcompensate by growing super long and spindly as the plants stretch for that access to light. When you're caring for your seedlings indoors, what you want is light that's close and consistent. When light is too far away, plants will prioritize height over strength as they stretch to reach for that light. The fix is relatively simple. Use grow lights and keep them close, just a few inches or so from the tops of your seedlings. You certainly don't want the light to be so close that it's making contact with your seedlings' leaves, but one of the great things about grow lights is that you can adjust the height. So as your seedlings grow, you can raise the level of the light. So they're always getting that consistent and close access to direct light. When it comes to determining how many hours of direct light you should give your plants, aim between 12 and 18 hours. You don't want to push it past 18 hours because the plants definitely need some time to calm down. So give them a little bit of darkness overnight before you turn the lights back on. What this is going to do is it's going to create a nice artificial environment for your seedlings while they spend a few weeks indoors ahead of making it out into your garden. Now, you don't have to use lights that were designed to be grow lights. You certainly could purchase some fluorescent bulbs or some CFL bulbs and just sort of set up your own lighting kit. But as gardening continues to grow in popularity, there are plenty of affordable options out there for grow light kits that you can use in your indoor growing space to take care of your seedlings. When it comes to common issues that can kill your seedlings, watering is probably at the top of the list. Too little water and your seedlings aren't going to thrive and their growth is going to be stunted. Too much water and your seedlings can rot, collapse, fall over, or have some serious mold issues. Roots need moisture, but they also need oxygen. Remember, the growing medium that you have is supposed to be light and airy, and it's for this very reason that you don't want to overwater. If you overwater, you end up strangling the roots of your seedlings. Overwatering can mess with the structure of your soil in a highly detrimental way. Constantly soggy soil pushes oxygen out and creates the perfect environment for mold and disease. The fix is aiming for even moisture and consistent watering, not soaking already saturated soil. Now, don't overcorrect and let your growing medium completely dry out between waterings, but you do want to let a little bit of that top layer dry out before you water your seedlings again. You also want to make sure that whatever vessel you have your seedlings in is well drained. So make sure that there are some drainage holes. Another great practice is to water from the bottom. This way, you don't risk harming the seedlings by pouring water over the top of them. So you can just take the cells that they're growing in and set them inside of a tray. And as long as your cells have drainage holes, you can put some water into the bottom of the tray set the cells inside, and your plants will be watered from the bottom up. I'm a big fan of bottom watering because it enables for a lot of control and consistency in watering my seedlings. But if you decide that you would prefer to top water, that's okay too. I would just recommend that you grab some fans. That way, you can avoid the next most common mistake gardeners can make, post-germination. And that mistake is poor airflow. Your seedlings might start off looking really healthy, but if there's stale, stagnant air, problems can develop very rapidly. Stale air promotes fungal growth like mold. It also slows stem development, leaving plants weak and prone to collapse. I've seen full trays of perfectly sprouted seedlings go downhill in just a few days because of poor airflow. The solution is simple. Keep a small fan running near your seedlings. This not only promotes stem development, but it also keeps fungal growth at bay. Now, it doesn't need to be on high. You don't need a hurricane. You just need a gentle breeze that's moving the air consistently. Spacing seedlings further apart also helps to promote airflow naturally. It's the same principle as spacing your plants out in your garden, only on a much smaller scale. A little airflow goes a long way to turning a tray of fragile seedlings into sturdy plants that are ready to be transplanted into the garden. Now, promoting good airflow isn't the only reason why you don't want to overcrowd your seedlings. Overcrowding is where a lot of gardeners can get themselves into trouble. When too many seedlings are packed together, they're constantly competing for light, water, and space. The result is weak growth and high risk for disease. Now, oftentimes when you're starting seeds indoors, you end up overseeding, probably a few seeds per cell. So one of the best practices for indoor gardening is to thin your seedlings. You want to make sure that a plant has enough space to grow. And if it's growing alongside of multiple other plants within the same cell, it's just not really going to have much of a fighting chance. If you have 3 seedlings growing in a cell, examine them and decide which one looks the healthiest, and remove the other 2. That is going to help ensure the health and success of the remaining plant. Now, when it comes to thinning, time is of the essence. You want to make sure that if you have 3 seedlings that are growing in the same cell, that they're not getting too big. Because if you decide then to pull out 2 of those seedlings, you don't know what's going on beneath the soil's surface. And if you pull those seedlings and it messes with the root system of the plant that's remaining, that could cause more issues. So thin them when they're very young. And if you feel weird about pulling the seedlings out, you could always just snip them off at the base. Now, it can feel wrong at first, and believe me, I totally get it. But giving a plant ample space to grow makes all the difference. If they're young enough and they don't have a super established root system, you could also choose to just save the seedlings that you thin and put them in their own individual cell. I actually end up doing that quite a bit, partly because I feel badly for the seedlings that I'm thinning, but mostly because I can't say no to more plants in my garden. When your seedlings sprout, you're going to be tempted to feed them immediately, but hold off on it just a little bit. These seeds that have just sprouted actually have all of the energy that they need in order to start to grow this plant. You should let them establish a little bit before you decide to give them any sort of fertilizer. The typical rule is to wait until there are 2 sets of true leaves before you start applying a fertilizer to your seedlings. Seedlings have tiny roots, and they're really working hard to get established. And some fertilizers, while they're great for mature plants, really don't interact well with super tender seedlings. Plants need nutrients, but it's really easy to overdo it with your brand new seedlings. So if you decide to fertilize your seedlings, start off really, really small. If you're using a liquid fertilizer, dilute it, probably down to about 1/4 or less of strength when you're first fertilizing. Then, as your seedlings continue to grow, you can start to build up the strength of that liquid fertilizer that you're applying. A great way that I've found to feed my seedlings without running the risk of over-fertilizing them is actually to incorporate a little bit of all-purpose slow-release fertilizer into my seed starting mix. So when I make a seed mix of cocoa coir, perlite, and vermiculite, I'll also add a handful of slow-release all-purpose fertilizer. That slow-release fertilizer is going to help your seedlings grow big and strong over time. I get it. You want to take care of your baby plants and you want to give them food, but taking it slowly is absolutely the best approach. It ensures that your seedlings grow a strong root system and develop healthy leaves without stress, setting them up really well for being transplanted into your garden. The final mistake that gardeners can make post-germination actually happens right before you get the seedlings into the garden. And that's by not hardening off your seedlings before transplanting. Indoor seedlings are absolutely pampered because they've never experienced heavy wind, harsh sun, or temperature swings. And if you just move them straight outside, that sudden change can shock them badly. When you start seeds indoors, there's a transitional period from inside to outside that every plant is going to require. And we call this process hardening off. And it's a pretty straightforward process, and it takes 7 to 10 days. What you're doing is you are getting your seedlings acclimated to the outside where they're going to spend the rest of the growing season. And that acclimation takes a little bit of time. You want to make sure that when you're first putting them out, that you're protecting them from things like heavy winds or harsh direct sunlight. And you only want them to be outside for maybe an hour the first day that you start hardening off. The next day, you can add another hour or two. And then by the end of the hardening off period, they've been outside for a full 8 hours or so. And that's when they're ready to finally make it into your garden. But timing is super critical. You don't want to get your summer vegetables hardened off too early because they might be exposed to some temperatures that are not favorable for their growth. You also don't want to rush the hardening off process and only do it over the course of a couple or a few days. Make sure that you're giving your plants enough time to acclimate to the conditions outside before they spend the rest of the season out there. You're going to want to start primarily in the shade and limit that direct sun exposure. You'll also want to consider some sort of windbreak so heavy breezes don't harm the plants. This step takes some patience, but it makes a huge difference with how your plants settle into the garden. Seedlings need the right light, water, airflow, and nutrients to thrive. They also need to be transitioned slowly from inside to out in your garden. Take care to avoid making these common mistakes post-germination, and you'll have strong, healthy plants in your garden this growing season. If you found this information helpful and you missed the first video in the series, I highly recommend that you give it a look. It covers off common mistakes gardeners can make pre-germination, and you can watch it here. And if you're interested in more content just about general seed starting, go ahead and click this one. Happy growing.